With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Nun Hey. Before we begin with the intro for today's Daf, we are actually up to Daf Nun Daled Amid Beis, and we left off towards the top of the Amid by the two dots. So the last sugya we learned was regarding the Keruvim, that even when the Goyim entered the Beis HaMikdash, they saw the Keruvim that were embracing one and the other. And the big question is, just to follow up right before we began, that the Yaakov was really pointing out that l'chu'ura, that means that this was a miraculous animation. Because the Keruvim, if they were modeled like the Keruvim that were on top of the Kapoides, like the Keruvim that Shlomo HaMelech added Zman by Yisrishin, they were not made in a way that they were, so to say, embracing each other. But this is some sort of nes. As we began yesterday, we read a little bit from the Zohar that the Keruvim Mamish, their wings are moving and they're playing music. It was a miraculous thing. So the big question is that they were not always embracing each other. That we know clearly. That whenever we were not doing what we needed to do, when the Yidden were not that in love with God, then the Keruvim physically were not embracing each other. So Bizman HaChurban, Churban means is that there's a Churban. B'pnei chatoeinu galinu me'artzeinu. If there's a Churban, then the Keruvim should have been facing opposite directions. What, Bizman HaChurban, they were embracing each other? That's the big question. And the Alter Rebbe, in Parshas Pekudei, has a gewaltige insight. He teaches Pekudei, Elei Pekudei, Chayev Adam Lifkoit es Ishtoi, B'shah sheyotze l'derech. That before a man goes on a trip, there's an obligation on the man to have a union with his wife. So the Alter Rebbe says that even Bizman HaChurban, B'pnei chatoeinu, doesn't change the love. And the very fact that we were being sent away into Galus, so there was a Chayev Adam Lifkoy, there was a certain closeness that God showed us. Imagine then, which would inspire us and give us the koyach to live like Eden for the almost 2,000 years that we were tragically in Galus. So yeah, even when the Goyim, or Dafka when the Goyim entered the Eichel, the Keruvim were embracing each other, and how great was that? Now we're going to continue on Daf Nun Daled Amid Beis, going to the Even HaShasiyah. We're going to learn, it looks very little. This is a very important sugya. And this is part of those areas in Torah that without Pnimiyas HaTorah, all you do is read the words. B'chlal, it's good to know that there's so many layers of understanding that we're not yet Zoichet Achab. At least we're reading the words. But I'm going to suggest a l'chu'ura insight based on what we learned in Chassidus, how to perhaps understand better exactly the machloikas of Tanoim. From where was the world created? How did the physical creation take place? And Daf Nun Hey proper, we're going to go back to something that we repeatedly learned in the Mishnah, that when the Dam HaPar and when the Dam HaSoyer were sprinkled, whether it was sprinkled inside the Aron HaKodesh. First of all, in the Aron HaKodesh, we made it clear that it was not sprinkled in a way where it needed to actually touch the kapoides, even though these are the words that the Torah uses. It doesn't mean touching the kapoides, but it means towards the kapoides. But there was achas l'mayla v'sheva lamata. Now we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on two psukim we have in Achrei Mos, which is Vayikra Perek Tez Zayin. We're going to have psukim Chav Yudalid and Tez Vav. One pasuk, Yudalit, speaks about the sprinkling of the Dam HaPar. In that pasuk, it's going to be very simple. In that pasuk, it's not clear how many times was the blood sprinkled Lamaila. It's not clear. But in that pasuk, it says explicitly that Lamata is Sheva Pa'amim, 7. The next pasuk that speaks about the sprinkling of the Dam HaSoyer has it clear that by the Dam HaSoyer, it's Achas Lamaila, but it's not clear how many Lamata. So we're going to have a few braises that are going to teach us how we get from the Torah Shebachsav, that which we know already from Torah Shebal Peh, that both of these bloods were sprinkled the same way. Achas Lamaila and V'sheva Lamato. And then we're going to move on to the machlokes we had on the Mishnah between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda regarding how many stands, golden stands, did we have in the Heichal. Was there one stand or was there two stands? Why would Rabbi Yehuda not allow for there to be two stands? So we will attempt to make a correlation between this Shitas Rabbi Yehuda and that which we learned just recently in Shkolim regarding the 13 shofros that we had in the Azara. 2 of the shofros were used to place money for bird karbanos. The Mishnah says the words, one was for kinim, one was for goizlei oila, and as we will see, the machlok is that Rabbi Yehuda held that neither of them was a shofar, was a pushka, was a box, was a chest for which someone who had a chiyuv to bring pairs of birds, no one who had a chiyuv had the luxury of just putting it into the box. And perhaps, as we'll see, that's the Havamina, one shita, that Rabbi Yehuda is afraid that even if you write on something what it is meant for, lav dafka people will be able to look, or they'll focus on the writing and they'll confuse one with the other. Not wanting to confuse the chayva with the nadava, Rabbi Yehuda held that there was no box for the chayva. Both of them was for bird nadavas, as we'll elaborate. We're going to chazer what we learned in Shkalim, and similarly, l'chayra, don't forget that dam hapar always has to come before dam hasoid. So Rabbi Yehuda did not want for us to have two stands, because how would you make sure that you don't confuse one with the other? Because you would write on it, this is for the part, this is for the soid. That's the first approach. Rabbi Yehuda does not subscribe that writing is sufficient to make sure we don't confuse one with the other. Actually, that's going to be disproved. And we're going to move on. That's going to really lead us into Daf Nun Vav, another understanding Bishitas Rabbi Yehuda, which will really come back to the whole Shita of Bereira, which will be a famous Daf of Bereira, which we have mamash almost verbatim a few times throughout Shas. But Chavra, let us start on Daf Nun Dalid Amid Beis. Right, we are in the top half of the Amid by the two dots, referring back that since the Mishnah, our Mishnah, the last Mishnah, Nach used the words Mishanit al Arain. So therefore, since the Nevi'im Rishonim, we said Shmuel and David revealed that the stone that was always there, that we called the Even Shesiyah, the foundation stone, the stone remained. So when the Aron Kodesh was above the ground, it was on the Even Shesiyah. So even when we didn't have the Aron Kodesh, the Kohen Gadol knew exactly where to put down the Machta, upon which he would put the Ketaitis from his second Chafina, because it was on the same place. Okay. So Ushesiyah Hoysa Nikreis, says the Gemara. That Tani we learned in a Braisa. What's Pshat Shesiyah? The translation of Shesiyah is foundation. Shemimeno Hu Shesasa Olam. From this stone the world was founded. So our Gemara says, not everyone agrees to that. Tanan, our Mishnah, is only like one man da'amar. Tanan keman da'amar, that means Tzion nivra ha'olam. Now Tzion really is referring generally to Yerushalayim, but just to have, for the sake of clarity, when you speak about Yerushalayim, the soul of Yerushalayim is the Beis HaMikdash. Very important. So today, when we daven Uvenei Yerushalayim, people say, what do you mean Uvenei Yerushalayim? Yerushalayim was never built as beautiful as it is today. Well, not Yerushalayim. That which extends from Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is the Beis HaMikdash. So Mitzia Nivra Ha'olam. And in the Beis HaMikdash itself, from the Holy of Holies, which would mean the Even HaShesiyah. The Tanya, and here we go through all the various shitas, starting with the first wide line. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer Oilam Emtsoy Isoy Nivra. The world was created from its center. L'chayra, the center pasha means from its core. Shneimar, as it says, I gewaldike words of Iyov, that God is telling him that for him to understand the present, he has to go back to the beginning, and God is speaking about the beginning. That bitsekes afar lamutzak, that when dirt is poured to a single bedrock, and then uregavim yidubako, then clumps of earth were stuck around the core. So that's what we would call the ultimate milmato lamayla, from the in out, and the in means mamish, from the center. Second shita is the opposite. Rabbi Yeshua oimer oila minatzadadim nivra, that the world was created from, so to say, its four sides, from its four edges. That the physical world began from the most peripheral part, and not from one point, but from four different points, from the Dalad Ruchais, and it went v'mizak milmaylo lamata, and they began to extend until they all joined. And he quotes a pasuk, which is a very a topic that's discussed a lot in Sefer Yetzirah, about the concept of snow, some in between of substance and not. So it says ki lasheleg yomer, that God says to the snow, heavy at it, you become the earth. Now, where did the snow come from? So he speaks about v'geshen matar, v'geshen mitrais uzoi. from showers of rain and from showers of mighty rain. Did we get the snow, and then from the snow came the earth. The vart is that the rains come from milmaila. So that's his raya, that it wasn't the earth was created from its core and then it extended outwards. The world began from the out and it went in. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says that Even Yora Kodesh Baruch Hu Bayam. He's speaking about there's a sea, there's Alma Diskasya. Then God threw a stone into the Yam, and now Mimenu Nishta Sa'olam. And from this stone the whole world was founded, or the solid part of the world was founded. Shenemar Almo Adoneo Hutba'u. Again, this is God, right, speaking L'chayra to Eov. Do you know, he tells him, into what were its bases sunken? Do you know, Eov, you know the beginnings? Mi Yara Evan Pinaso, who cast down the cornerstone? And the fourth Shita, which is what our Mishnah is going to follow, the Shita's Chachamim, the Chachamim Oimim Mitzion Nivra. No, the world began from Tzion, which means from the Makayim of the Beis HaMikdash. Shenemar, as it says, Mizmar from Asaf, Le Asaf, Keil Elokim, O Almighty God, Hashem. Ve'oimer, and it says further, Mitzion Michlal Yoifi. So we teach Mimenu Muchlal Yoifi Yoishel Oilam, that the beauty of the whole world comes from Tzion. Meaning over here, the whole world comes from Tzion. Now I want to share the following. We learned over Shavuos, the Rebbe's Maimer of Mishar Sheikdimu Yisrael Nasa V'Nishma Tavshin Chafei. And it's a Moide de Kamaimer in which the Rebbe really explains that you have two Seder Ishtalshalis. Mamish. You have God's creation, which we are coming from the Ein Sof into a physical world. It's Milmaila Lamata. But then we learn that even before the Ein Sof, when we're going to Atzmuz, that what was the original cause for all the causes? What motivated God to create before you even had the Ein Sof? So the quote of Chazal, that the Eibishter was Nimlach b'nishmeiseim shal tzadikim, and as the Rebbe points out, va'amech kulam tzadikim, and how this is explained by the Magid, as Chassidus very often quotes, that God has in his essence the imprint of a Yid neshama beguf, banematim. And this imprint, even though that we were only created much later, but God is Lamayla Mazman. So the original cause of whole creation is a Jew here keeping the mitzvahs. Obviously beginning with a Yid doing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. That's the Iker place where we keep the mitzvahs. That was the cause. So creation is Milmata Lamayla. Mamish, this is the question. If it's milmaila lamata, I guess first you have the Alma Diskasya, then you have the Alma Disgalia. If it's milmaila lamata, Shitas Rabbi Yoshua, you have Minatzadadim Nivra. And by the way, that's mamish related. Milmaila lamata. The milmaila lamata was benisan nivru ha'olam. It's all connected. Rabbi Eliezer, that's milmata lamaila. Milmata lamaila means me'emtza isoi. But me'emtza isoi, it's not just the physical core of the world. It has to be from Yidin. The core of the world must be, the Chachamim say, it's from a Yid. A Yid, Neshama Beguf, is beginning with the Kohen Gadol doing the Avodah on Yom Kippur. That is the original cause of all of the creation. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Agad Loimer. Here he's called Rabbi Eliezer Agad. This is the same we just read in Pirkei Avos. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenes, the Talmud of Yechem and Zakkai. That Eile told us, Hashamayim v'ha'aretz bihi baram. B'yoyim ha'sayis havai elikim eretz v'shamayim. Taiches Rabbi Eliezer told us Shamayim was created from Shamayim. This is all Behemshech. That know that the heavenly bodies are created from the heavens. We're not now Begashmias that Rashi writes. Told the Shamayim is Ma'oiros, the two luminaries, the sun and the moon and the Kechavim. Beruchnis we're speaking about. In other words, there is a shita that says that the cause of physical creation came from something that was physical, but the cause of spiritual creation came from something heavenly. Told us ha'aretz ma'aretz nivru. But again, the Chachamim l'shitasam know that this is the original cause of all creation. Because of this, there was Bechlal and Ein Sof. Ein Sof doesn't mean Ein Tchila. What we call in Chassidus Atzmos, that was the beginning. And what was wrong with it just being the way it was? Because it wanted a Yid keeping mitzvahs. So everything came from Milmata. Even all of the Olamas prior, the Ein Sof, came about from the Aretz. As it says that Mizmar Liyasov Keil Elikim. God, oh God Almighty, Hashem Diber, God speaks, and Vayikra Eretz, and God calls forth the earth. Mizrach Shemesh Ad Mevay, from the rising of the sun to its setting. And V'omer, that when God called forth, where did it come from? Michlal Mitzion Michlal Yoifi. That all of the beauty really originates from Tzion. God speaks out, Elikim Hoifia, meaning Mimenu from Tzion, Muchlal Yoifyoi Shel Oilam. And somehow this is a raya that it's not just the Gashmizdika world, but it's even told the Shamayim, the cause is from the Aretz, meaning the Emtsoi Isoi, meaning the Eden, which means automatically the Beis HaMikdash and us, the Iker, it's not just a physical place, but the Yid serving God through our avoid of Torah and mitzvahs. All right, last line in the Amid. Now we're going to get into a technical, beautiful back and forth of psukim, clarifying where do we see in Torah Shabbat that which we know from Torah Shabbat Peh, how exactly did the Kohen Gadol sprinkle the dam both towards the ark covering, then towards or on the paroiches. So it says in the Mishnah, the last line in the Amid, not l'sadam. This is the first time after the Ketores. He goes now and he takes the blood of the bull, always in every location. The dam of the pod comes before the dam of the soir, and the dam of the bull was not on the ground like the machta was. No, that was held by someone that's steering memishim amarisboy. And how did he sprinkle it? So etc., like matzlif. So what's matzlif? So machavei Rabbi Yehuda showed. This is something that if you have a visual, you'll chap a lot better than reading it from words. Showing it means kiminagdina, like someone who's giving malchus. Now here again, you have different shitas what it means. So Rashi says, as we spoke out, that when you give malchus, the whipper doesn't want for the whip to hit the same place in the back of the whippy. It's going to hurt him. Dafnisht. Do what God wants. Don't exaggerate. God forbid. So every blow falls on a different place. So, and as we just speak it out again, that lamaila means that the palm of your hand is facing up, or the way the Braisa will say, the back of your hand is facing down. Don't get confused. Whenever it says the lamaila means lamata, it means is the reference the palm or is the reference the back? But lamaila means that after he would dip his finger in the mizrak of the dam of the bull, he would put the palm up, the back of his hand down, and he would flick it up. That is what Rav Yehuda did. He made that motion. Now what happens then is, when you're throwing it this way, that which is being projected makes as an up arch because your finger went up. And really the meaning of al hakapoides, as we'll learn from Torah Shebal Peh, not that it hit the kapoides. No, it landed on the ground before the Aron HaKodesh. Al means that because you did it l'mayla, that one was in the airspace above the kapoides for a moment. And then it would fall the closest. I don't want to use a mashal lahavdil from playing baseball because we're speaking about something holy over here. But you understand, when your hand is up, it goes high. When your hand is down, it's a whole different movement. Danny, I'm a Brazilian, I take back my whole baseball, so garnish it on it. Garnish from baseball. Halavai a little bit over here. So let's go over here. When you, the other 7 was your palm is facing down, the back of your hand is facing up. And the matzlif meant, according to Rashi, that he made an effort that wherever the first one hit, the subsequent 7, each one should fall closer to him. That's pshat kematzlif. Not on the same place. Now let's begin, Chevra. If you have a chumash, that's good. You don't need a chumash. I'll say it out by heart. It says like this, in Achrei Mois, which is in Vayikra Tez Zayin and Pasuk Yud Dalid. The Torah says, V'lokach midam hapor. Now, it doesn't say how many times. We don't even understand this to mean one time, because the emphasis here is that it should be on the pnei hakapoides. Then it says, "Vaited velifnei hakapoides," before the kapoides, yaza sheva pa'amim. Whenever the pasuk says al, whenever it says lifnei, so the way the Tanoim use the words, it's lamayla and lamata. Because the al was the one, taka not on top, but it came the closest. Because your finger was up. It went high, it went far. When your hand is down, then things fall closer. Naturally. And then the lifnei means lamata, just to get that clear. That's Pasuk Yud Dalet. Pasuk Tezvav continues that the shachat, as we said, that the shechita didn't even happen of the soid. Well, when he would leave after doing the avoid of the dam hapar that he would place on the kan hazov, l'kula alma, there was one kan, then the Pasuk says, the shachat esir achatas asher lo'am, because the seir, the par, that was the whole, was it his? Was it a shutfim? Was it a tzibur? The soid was everyone's. Vehevi es damai elmi beis laparoiches. Beis laparoiches means he went into the Holy of Holies. Then it says, V'asa es damai kasher asa l'dam hapar. Really, that's enough. He would do the same thing, but the pasuk continues. V'hiza oisoi, singular, ala kapoides. That is understood to mean once. The word oisoi is not written by the pod. By the pod, we don't know how many lamailo. We don't know how many should be al penei. It just says v'hiza be'etzboi, doesn't say a number. Here v'hiza oisoi ala kapoides means once from the soir, and then it says v'lifnei akapoides. How much? Doesn't say. Okay, now we got that. Let's go. Top line on Daf Nun Hey Tanach. We learned in Abraisa Chavre Keshumasa when he sprinkles the dam in amaza al hakapoides, he doesn't sprinkle it on mamish on. When we learn the Mishnah, when we say this in Davening Yom Kippur, not on the higher edge of the covering, not to hit the lower edge, not to touch it at all. Ella keneged oivi yoshal kapoides, opposite the thickness of the ark, opposite, not on top of it. Very good. When it says achas lamaila, what does lamaila mean? Mitzaded yodoi lamata. He turns his hand down. Guys, don't get confused. This braisa is speaking about the back of the hand. So achas lamaila is when he turns the back of his hand lamata. And when it says later that the other 7 is lamata, again we're looking now at the back of the hand. That means mitzaded yodoi. He turns the back of his hand up. So his finger, naturally, when you sprinkle, it's going to hit closer without making an extra effort. How do you know that it's not on the ark cover? The Torah says, al. The pasuk puts it together. Now, don't even mention v'lifnei hakapoides by the sword. Why? Because the gama milmata the par, as we'll see in a moment. The Torah doesn't even say how many times you sprinkle it lamata and pasuk tezvav. So where do you know it from? You learn it because you do to the sword like you do to the... Don't mention it at all. So lamal nemar. So why does the Torah say v'lifnei hakapoides and pasuk tezvav? Says the baraisa la akushe, to make a comparison, to make a hekesh from the al to the lifnei. The lifnei is the teacher. Lifnei doesn't mean on top. Lifnei means before. So that teaches the student, which is the al, that they are similar. They have to be similar, meaning, mal lifnei, the lav al, in front, not on top, on the ground. So even the al, the lav al, frekte gemara or frekte braisa, adarabo. Lo yomer lamaylo v'par, same kasha. The Torah doesn't say how many numbers, how many times he sprinkled al. The Torah and the pasuk tezvav only mentions the seva lifnei. On the al, it doesn't say. How do you know what you did it? Because the Torah says in pasuk tezvav, asa es domai kasher asa. We compare. So if we're comparing them anyway, don't mention it. The gamar milmaila, we know the number of how many times he sprinkled it on top from the number of the soid. By soid, it doesn't say number 1, but like the fact that it says v'hiza oisoi ala kapoides, that means 1. So takolama nemar. Why don't we say this direction? Why don't we say la'akushe, that even when the Torah says v'lifnei, it should be like al. Fakert, leave the al kepshutai. Al means on top. And then add that lifnei also means on top. One is further, one is closer, but maybe they all have to go on top of the urn or on top of the covering. Ma al mamish. Why don't we say al lifnei lifnei mamish? So counters the Gemara. Hi mai. No, that would not work. Because I amrad bishleima, the way we said it, the way it is. That lamata, the soir, is mentioned in pasuk tezvav. La akushe, la maila the par, like we explained. La akushe, to make a hekesh. that what? That the al is like the lifnei. None of it touches the Aron Kodesh. Then, like you mentioned before, why is it that God has to mention B'chlal and Pasuk Tez Yud Dalid? Why does it have to say Al Pnei HaKaporos if the Torah is not giving you a number? Say nothing, and we will already know from the fact that it says V'asa es domai kasher asa. I have another limit for that. It's going to work. What's the other limit? The Tanach of Eliezer ben Yaakov, when it says in Pasuk Yud Dalid Al Pnei HaKaporos, there the Torah adds the words Kedma. That whole statement is needed to tell you Zeh Bona'av that every time it says Pnei, face means east, and that's very important. So, for example, when it says that Al Yavi b'choleis El HaKodesh Mi beis la peroiches el pnei hakapoides. And if you enter chayiv misa, you know when a person, God forbid, is chayiv misa v'dei shemayim, when they enter, if they enter el pnei hakapoides, if they enter the kodesh kachim through the eastern entry, which is the way the Kohen Gadol entered. But if you're going to enter from the elevators, the manual elevators that the people that came to do refurbishment, they were lowered from the ceiling, they're not violating anything because El Pnei HaKaporos means that you can enter from the east side. And other areas where we need to know that Pnei means from east to west. Oh, so that's going to fit. But Elai Amrat that Lamaila, the pod will be the source of the Hekesh in the opposite direction. And from that we will learn Adarabba, that even the Velifnei HaKaporos has to be Al Mamish, then there'll be a problem. Lamata Desoy Lama Asa. You won't have a teretz. Why did the Torah have to speak about the Velifnei HaKaporos in Pasuk Tezvav when it doesn't mention a number? Anyways, you need a Hekesh, don't write anything. Gewaldik. So therefore, clear that the extra is to make a Hekesh that just like Lifnei means not on, even the Al doesn't mean Kipshutai. Gewaldik. Let's go weiter. Second to last narrow line. Tanach Rabbanon Pasuk Tezvav. Vehiza oisoi. We're speaking about the dam of the soir. Oisoi means it. It beloshen yachid. You sprinkle it, the blood, on the kaporos one time, and then velifnei hakaporos. How many times? It doesn't say. So lamatnu kama lamaila b'soir achas. The Torah here is alluding to one on top. However, lamata b'soir any of their kama. How many times? So it says the Braisa already done. I'll tell you the following. Nemru damim lamata b'parim pasuk Yudalid. It says clearly by the pad yaza sheva pa'amim. The nemru lamata b'soir. So we compare one to the other. Ma lamata b'pad is sheva. Af lamata b'soir sheva. Nice, says the Braisa. Maybe not. Efshir nisht. Oy kalach l'derech zu. Maybe go on a whole different path, which will be an opposite path with an opposite conclusion. Maybe say nemru damim lamayla b'soir. Look inside Pasuk Tezvav. Compare one to the other in the same animal. We understand Vihiza oisoi ala kaporos to mean once. Achas. Then the lifnei hakaporos is vague. So learn soir from soir. Aflamata, maybe by the soir it's only achas. Why do you say that? Answers the Braisa. Oh, you have two options. So then we have to use our seichel. Nira lemidoimam. Let's see, right? To which we're speaking about the sprinkling of the soil lamata, to what is it most similar? Donin mata mimata. The ain't donin mata milmaila. Says the Gemara, why? Maybe adarabba donin gufay me gufay. At least, even though it's taka, you're learning the lamata from the lamaila, but you're sticking within itself. Why don't we say donin gufay me gufay? The ain't donin gufay me alma. Me alma means from an outside law. Pot is outside. So indeed, now says the Braisa that Pasuk Tezvav writes, before it goes into the details, it says Va'asa es damai kasher asa ladam hapar. Why did you need to write that? Anyways, you wrote V'hiza oisai ala kaporos v'lifnei hakaporos. Why do you have to compare the bloods together? Talmud Lamed Va'asa es damai. This is the Pasuk Tezvav. This is about the soil. Yudalad is the part, Tezvav is the soil. Va'asa es damai kasher asa ladam hapar. She'ain Talmud Lamed. The whole thing is extra. Don't write anything. Don't write kasher asa. Because the Torah spoke how you do the par. The Torah now speaks about the soil. Everyone is a standalone pasuk. Uma Talmud Lamed kasher asa. No, sheyu kol asi yoisav shavois. Meaning kishem shalamata bepad. Explicitly, Yudalid, the pasuk says Yaze Sheva Pa'amim, Kach Lamata B'Soir should be Sheva. Says the Braisa Vaiter. Good. So now you explained, Lamadnu, we learned, Kama Lamata Bipar, because it's written explicit. And from it, we teach to the Sa'ir, who's the student, so we also know that Sa'ir is 7. But now let's focus on the same limud. How many times did you sprinkle it? Lamayla. Lamayla Bipar Eino Yodeya. If you open up a Chumash, again, just to make it clear, the Torah doesn't write the way we would think explicit by the Sa'ir once, but the understanding of Vihiza Oisoi ala Kapoiris means once. And by the par, where it says V'lakach midama par Vihiza be'etzboi al pnei Kapoiris Kedma, doesn't say Oisoi, we have no idea. So V'hareni done. So let's make a limit, let's use our minds. Nemer damam lamata lamayla b'soir. That there is B'chlal and Avoid of Lamayla. And it says damam lamayla b'par. So now let's compare the numbers one to the other. Ma lamayla b'soir, clearly, that's clear, is achas. So af lamayla b'par is oichet achas. Says the Braisa, asks the Braisa, well, why not? Mamish like above. Oiklach l'derech zu. Why don't you go in a different direction? Why don't you say that nemru damim lamata b'par sheva pamim, and it says damim lamayla b'par, but we don't know how many times. So why don't we compare dam to dam of par to par? Malamata b'par sheva, maybe af lamayla by the par should be sheva. Answers the Braisa, well, you have two options. So nira limidaima. Let's see. Right, what are we focusing on? The Lamayla Bipad, what is it more comparable to? Done in Maila Milmaila. Makes more sense. By the Soir is one. Milmaila. The ain't done in Maila Mimato. Asks the Braisa Adarabba, done in Gufay Megufay, wouldn't it be better to learn the dinim of the Damapar from Damapar? I know it's Maila Tomato, but it's Parpar. The ain't done in Gufay Me'alma. So that's why Nachamo, the pasuk that says in Tezvav, even though the pasuk explicitly is saying that the soid is like the par, Keilu, the par is the teacher and the soid is the student, but it's self-understood, it's a two-way street. We fully compare them one to the other. So since there is a detail in the par that's vague, we learn it from the damasoid for them to be the same. Since it says Va'as says Damoy, Kasher Asa. See, the Braisa takes purposefully out the words to the Dam HaPar, because we're not learning Soid from Par, now we're learning the Par from the Soid. The whole clause is not needed. Kasher Asa, Matam, Kasher Asa, Sheyu Kol Asi Yosef Shavos, which means Kishem Shalamata B'Par Sheva, Kachlamata B'Soir Sheva. As we had before in the first part of the Braisa, and now for the latter part of the Braisa, Ucheshem Shalamayla B'Soir Achas, Kachlamayla B'Par is Achas, and that's it. Weiter. Then we learned in the Mishnah that when the Kohen Gadol did the sprinkling, and now we're even going back to the Kodesh HaKodshim, and when he sprinkled it against the Paroiches, he would count. And as we said, Achas, just for a minute, Achas is the Achas Lamayla. Achas. And then when he did the Sheva Lamata, he didn't say Achas Shtaim Shalosh. Achas v'achas, achas v'sholish. So says the Gemara, I want you to know that there is a machloikes Tanoim, how he counted by the Sheva Lamata. According to all of the Tanoim, you link the Lamayla to the Lamata. The question is on the Seder. Do you say it the way it's written in our Mishnah? Achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'sholish, or do you say shtayim v'achas, sholish v'achas? Ton Rabbanan, achas, achas v'yachas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'sholosh, achas v'arba, achas v'chomesh, achas v'sheish, achas v'sheva, as we had in our Mishnah, and as we have the version here, these are the words of Rebbe Meir. Or in the Mesoides Hashas, he brings from the Yalkut that it's punkt fakir. These are the words of Rebbe Yehuda. But let's keep on just not get confused. Let's read it the way it's written by us. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no. Yes, that you always link the Lamayla with the Lamata. When you do the Lamayla, it's Achas. When you do the first one, Lamata, Achas v'Achas, but you don't know which one is which. But let's keep on going. When you do the second one, you say Shtayim v'Achas, Sholosh v'Achas, Arba v'Achas, Chomesh v'Achas, Sheish v'Achas, and Sheva v'Achas. Machloikis, which one is mentioned first? Is the Lamayla mentioned first or is the Lamayla mentioned last? Says the Gemara. V'loi pligi. V'loi pligi means that according to both opinions, Both ways are okay. It's really about what is the better way of counting. But even according to one Tana, if the Kohen Gadol would have counted the opposite way, it would have been good. Elama, marki yasrei, you marki yasrei. The pshat of the Gemara, as Rashi says 17 lines before the bottom of the Amid, is that in certain locations, he gives an example when people count 21, 22. So now we're quoting English, right? 21. You mentioned the larger number first and then the smaller number second. In other areas, when they would count, they would say 120. 21 in Yiddish, 22. You would mention the smaller number first. Now, just for the sake of clarity, not to be confused, when you hear the words like in our Mishnah, achas ushtayim, achas is not the smaller number. Achas is the bigger number. You're going to get confused, Anashi. Because achas is the lamayla. Let's go to this whole discussion of the hishtalshelus ba'or yashar. You begin with lamayla and then you come to the lamata. Or is it really the M is that it's Momata Lamayla? B'min Nimlach. That the world was created from Tzion. Then you mentioned the more detailed first, which is the Lamata. That's really the Machloikas. Like, how do you perceive reality? You're living in the Or Yashar, you're living in the Or Chayz. And really that makes all the Machloikas between who said what a lot more significant, because you have all of these phenomenal insights. I heard someone put together a sefer from the Torah of the Rebbe regarding all of these machlekes and tanoim amaroim, that the Rebbe gave so many very important insights into the premise, which will explain maybe all of their arguments. What's Rav Meir? Rav Meir was on a much higher level. Fakertis chaverim were not yored l'tzoiv datoi. Right, Rabbi Yehuda bar Abeloi was the Rosh Hamedabrim. Let me see, connected more with the relative to the periphery, to the chitzonius, relative to the shita of Rabbi Meir, mamish connected to this machlokes. Okay, so now the Gemara says the kula alma miyas hazor rishoina tzricha minyan im kolachas ve'achas. You have to link the lamayla with the lamata. The only question is it b'derech lamayla lamata lamayla? Why do you have to link it at all? So Rabbi Lazar gives us a logic. Again, we're learning Gemara. What's the logic? Shelo yita b'hazois. Not to err when you're counting. And like Rashi says over here, that if you have to verbally count and you make the number more prolonged by adding the achas with all of the details, so then you're going to have more time in between each sprinkling. And that little pause, because you have to verbalize, will help you not make a mistake, because Taka, the Kohen Gadol is by himself. He might skip a number. He might go from 3 to 5, I don't know. So when the counting and with the details, which means it takes him more time, gave him more mental space to concentrate, not to skip a number or not to repeat a number. It can go both ways, not to make a mistake. However, Rabbi Yechanan gives no reason. He says this is not a logic. He said based on a pasuk, and the pasuk we just quoted, the pasuk Tezayin, Perek Tezayin pasuk Yudalid. This is regarding the sprinkling of the dam of the par. And when it says Velifnei hakapoides yazer, we're not focusing on the Sheva Pa'amim. But if you look inside pasuk Yudalid, the pasuk already begins Vehiza be'etzboi al penei hakapoides kedma. The Torah says the word Hiza. So when it says Sheva Pa'amim, you didn't have to write the words Yazer. Yazer is mamish extra. Oh. So when it says because it says he's regarding the al penei hakapoides. It says yazeh for the lamato, right? The sheva pa'amim, that they're both connected. You have to do the Torah links them. You have to verbally count the lamayla together with the lamata, one way or the other, one direction or the other. And the nafkamina between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yechanan is huge, and that is Ike benai d'loimana. If he didn't count, but he didn't make a mistake, if he made a mistake, he has to do the avodah again. But if he didn't make a mistake, according to Rabbi Elazar, that this is, so to say, whether it's a biblical or whether it's a rabbinic, so to say, geder, to make sure you don't make, if you didn't, so you didn't make a mistake, you're good to go. According to Rabbi Yechanan, God is telling you to do so. And therefore, if you didn't count, you have to do it again. Wow. Gewaldig.
Just a side note, was the Kohen Gadol re-dipping his finger inside the cup?
Yes, he needed to do it every time. Yes, Rabbi Chaim. We'll speak about that more. Now, Yotza, we're going back to the Mishnah. He now, right, he did the avodah of the par. He didn't even shech the sword yet. Yotza vihi nichoy. and he put the dam of the par al kan hazov shebehechel. Now really, it should say v'chulei, because the Gemara is going to be focusing on now he went out. He shechted the dam hasoir. First they brought the soir to him. To him, as we explained, they bring the soir to bein ha'ulam la'mizbeach. He shechts the soir. He goes into the Holy of Holies and he does the same avodah with the soir. Now he goes out. Now he has to continue with the avodah of the dam in the heichel, towards or on the paroiches. That's another machlekes. But here again, the pod comes before the soir. So he has in his hand the dam hasoir and he has to switch it. So the Chachamim say he puts down the dam hasoir because there was another stand, and he picks up the dam hapar. And that is what Rabbi Yehuda says, no, there was only one kan. Ubemela, he couldn't put down the soir. You can't do that. You don't have where to put it. The mizrakim had pointy bottoms. You need it first to... Yes.
How is it possible that the blood wouldn't get congealed? If it was sitting there, if the dama power was sitting there the whole time, he's got to shech the soil and go in and come out. I mean, we learned before that you have to have a clean skin.
So maybe Bruce, we can unmute Bruce over here. There's some noise in the background. If you can do that, as to unmute. How long does it take for blood to congeal? I'm curious. That's a good question. I know human blood, animal blood might be different.
I'd say if it were less than a minute in small amounts.
But if it's a large amount, think about a bull.
No pressure. So if it comes from an artery, it takes longer. Must be 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes.
Vein blood, then it's less than a minute.
So Baruch, does it make sense to you by natural laws that if you have all of the blood of a bull, this is a large amount of blood, for 10 minutes, it can stay without getting congealed?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, weiter. But they're good. So Tanan Hasam, now we're going to focus on this machlokes. And we're going to have the initial suggestion as to what's wrong with two stands. One approach and another approach. This is mamash beautiful, how we compare dinim. Now we are familiar with it for those of us who learn shkalim, because if you remember, we learned about, don't confuse the 15 offices with the 13 shofars. There were 13. A shofar is just a name that we give in the Mishnah for a pushka that has a narrow top like a shofar. If you flip it upside down, this is just to prevent people from putting their hands in and instead of giving, taking, God forbid. So you had this today in our pushkas. We just have a narrow opening. Same concept. So you can put in, but you can't easily take out. So what were the 13 shofars? So 2 of them was to place money for people who wanted to bring bird karbanis. Now it doesn't mean that you needed to place it in the shofar. It means is that if I would like to place my money there, and I know that I can rely that the Kohanim will not bring the afternoon tamid until they empty out all of the money donated for the bird karbanis, and we can rely on the Kohanim. So that was an option. So you can put the money in there, and you know that by the end of the day you got your kapara. Now we have generally 2 types of bird karbanis: donation karbanis, and even if you bring a pair, both of them is an oila. That's a donation carbon. Versus the few people that have to bring obligatory bird karbanos, whenever that is. Sometimes it's only if you're not wealthy. Sometimes it's lechatchila. You bring 2 bird karbanos, 1 chatos, 1 oil. Another important detail, that whoever put money in these shofars, they would not just deposit coins, because it's very important that when the kohen removes the coins, he removes the coins from that specific owner. So the money that was needed for the birds were bundled in some sort of bag or bundle. So one was separated from the other. Now the kohen did not know which bundle belongs to which person, but he didn't need to know, because all he needed to intend is that whoever is the owner of these coins and therefore of these karbanis, I'm bringing the carbon for him or for her. That's 100% okay, as we learned in Zvachim that a machsheva stam is good. If you have in mind the wrong owners, then you mess it up. You have in mind stam. Now, another detail, the final detail, is that there are only 2 bird types. They're from the same general family, but there are only 2 bird types that can be offered when you bring a bird carbon. One bird type is called toirim, b'lashon abim, or a toir, taf reish mitachoylam. That means a turtle dove in English. And the other one is called b'nei yoina, a young pigeon, a young dove. And with all the details that the toir has to be mature, with the becoming gilded or yellow, and the b'nei yoina is before it becomes gilded, v'chulei. So the Mishnah says over there that there were 2 boxes. On one box it said kinim, which is the plural of kan or kain, which means a pair of birds. On the other box, it said b'nei yoina. So the Chachamim understand that one box, the kinim, guys remember, was for chayva. Whoever needed, was mechuyev to bring bird karbanos. Again, they can buy the birds and give it to the kohen. But if they didn't want to stay there the whole time, they could have placed their money in the box that was for kinim. And people that wanted to bring a donation bird pair, they would put it in the box called b'nei yoina. So holds the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda said, absolutely not. If you are obligated to bring a pair of birds, you had no shofar for you. You needed to give it to a kohen. There were two boxes, there were two shofars. They were both for donation birds. Why do you need to have two boxes? Oh, because since you had an option to bring either Toidim or B'nai Yoina, and they had a different value, so if I'm leaving the money which was enough to buy only the B'nai Yoina, they were cheaper because they were younger, or the opposite, so then you have to have separate boxes. That's what we're going to take off. Tanach, some 3 lines from the bottom, that Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, disagreeing with the sages. The sages hold that Kinim, Chayva, B'nai Yoina, Nedava, no, lo yhoyu shayfaris likinei Chayva. But he explained why. Not because you need to have two different boxes because each value was different, which is an issue, which has to be explained. But the words of Rabbi Yehuda is because if you would have a box for chayvis, oy geval taroivis, there's going to be an intermixing. Now, he didn't explain what it means, and we're going to have to identify what is the issue. That will be the connection. Nukuda. So now, says the Gemara, let's understand shkalim, and then we'll link it to our Rabbi Yehuda here that did not allow to have two stands. What's the meaning over there? So here, take number 1. Rabbi Yosef, the great Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef, I'll tell you what it means. It means if you're going to have both boxes are both for nedava. Nedavas are only oilers. I'm not talking about the money issue. That has to be explained. But no matter, if you know everything is a donation, the nekuda here is everything is going to be brought for an oila. That's good. But if you have two boxes and one is l'chayva and one is for nedava, and let's now presume, that's the whole Rabbi Yehuda, that even though each one is written, you write on the box what it is, but when we don't trust, Kahana might not read what it says. Writing is not enough of a guarantee that you're not going to confuse. So here, he might remove the money from the box that was designated for chayva. He will think he removed it for nedava, which means he's going to offer both these birds with the avoida of a bird oila, that it's done lamaila, by the birds lamaila, not lamata, that none of it is eaten, all of it is burnt, completely not bringing a carbon chayva. So to prevent from that from happening, they both have to be at least nedavas. So at least you won't make that confusion. Now to that, Amalei Abaye, when he heard that from Rabbi Yosef, he asked him, I don't understand. You are afraid that a kohen will accidentally take money from a box that really was for chayva and offer them both as nadava, but the navi today make two boxes, meaning one for chayva and one for nadava. V'nichtov alayu hay l'chayva hay v'nadava. So don't write kinim and b'nei yoina. Write clearly. Like the Chachamim hold that Kinim was l'chayva. Write it. That was the whole point of Rabbi Yosef. Is a raya that what says the Gemara? This is beautiful. Rabbi Yehuda, Dafman Hamad Beis, Leis Lake Sivam. He doesn't consider that just because you're going to write chayva on top of the Kinim, or just that is sufficient for you to be safeguarded for the kohen not to make that confusion. The kohen won't read it. And that's
kind of any other shipment.
Oh, 1 second. We're going to get to there, Rabbi Chaim. He's going to be refuted. But it's just beautiful to see the link. And Abaye, right, the Gemara is proving this point to respond to Abaye from our Mishnah. Now, at least you see the link. Because the Tanan, look in our Mishnah, it says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer loy hoyusham elokan echad bilvad. And why is that? So the presumption is, because according to the Chachamim, like we mentioned, when you have two stands, you would first put down whichever blood you're holding, and then you would lift up the new blood that you're going to use. And I'm saying that dafka because, as you remember, any step of the avodah has to be done in the right hand. Now, true, we learned that which is only considered a preliminary, like walking into the Kodesh Kachim, clearly he held it with the left hand. the ketaitis. But whenever, even by preliminaries, if you can use your right hand, use your right hand. The advantage of first putting down the old blood will be that when you're picking up now the dam that you're going to be using for the next step, you can pick it up with your right hand. You can mamash use the whole time your right hand. You put down the old with your right hand, you pick up the new with your right hand. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you don't have such an option because there's only one stand. So I don't care, it's left is going to be used. Whichever one is holding the old cup, the other hand is going to have to be used to pick up the new cup. And why wouldn't he also make two stands? The answer must be because if there's two stands, like we said, you put it down first, now you have two bowls in front of you. You, God forbid, can mistake one for the other. Now, obviously, this is going to be challenged. There's different amounts of blood. The color of the blood looks different. We'll get to that. But because he has to pick up now the dam hapad, he might pick up the dam hasoir. He has to pick up the dam hasoir, he might pick up the dam hapad. But the question is, so right, understand, par soir. It must be that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't feel that writing is enough of a safeguard. Great. So Rabbi Yehuda l'shitasoi, that is all the approach of Rabbi Yosef, says the Gemara. Oh, and trei my tamaloi, mishum de machalfi. You might confuse and take the, one and so, Elo, that's the raya that Rabbi Yehuda lays like Siva. What the Gemara is going to do now, before we come back to our Mishnah, right, is refute the Sol Shita of Rabbi Yosef. That when Rabbi Yosef interpreted that the reason why there wasn't a shofar for chayva, taroivus means you might confuse the chayva bin adava, on that the Gemara says meisvei, and according to Mishnah in Shkolim. Shalosh esrei shofros haya b'migdash or shofaros. There were 13 of these chests, pushkas. For haya kasuv aleihen tiklin chadatin. Remember the new Shkolim. The tiklin atikin. If you remember, because not only is there a surplus every year, hopefully, but most importantly, if a Jew did not bring the shekel of Tafshin Pei, he can bring it on Tafshin Pei Aleph. And not that it's used for this year's avodah. It's joined with the surplus of last year. And we're going through all the 13. And the kinin, and the goizlei oila, and the box for the eitzim, and the box for the levaina, and the box for the zav lakapoides, and then the 6 linen dava. Now let's go by this over. We're quoting the Mishnah. Tiklin chadatin elu shkalim shel kol shana v'shana. Tiklin atikin mishul shakal ishtaked. You didn't bring it last year, do tshuva. Yishkol lishana habal. It's almost worded in the opposite. In other words, it means that bring it now, but it's going to be joined with the old shkalim. And there was a surplus. They already had that fund. Kinin hein toiden. Gois leyoyla hein b'nei yoyla. Vekulan oylois divrei Rebbe Yehuda. And the point is, what's the raya over here? Now, for animals had no boxes. Just to know something else, why didn't they make a box for animals? Because you have to do smicha. And even though smicha is not ma'akev, they didn't want for people just to put it in the box and go away and rely on the kahanim. Birds don't eat smicha, so they gave that opportunity. So what's the raya over here? The raya is that that such a confusion will not happen. Such a confusion will not happen. Why is that? What's the raya, chevra? Help me out over here. Why won't there be a confusion? Maybe because the Mishnah writes v'haya kasav alein. Maybe because the Mishnah points out that every box had something written on it. Or maybe it's because, like Rabbi Chaim said before, why wouldn't you confuse the tiklin chadatin with the tiklin atikin? You can also confuse that. But they were not afraid that they would confuse it. There is no fear of confusion. And therefore, the Gemara says that no, the whole confusion has nothing to do with them not reading, with that writing is not enough of a safeguard. We're going to have to then explain our Mishnah, but just at least to open up the new understanding when going back to Shkolim, ki aser avdimi, Amar, he says, he always came with information that you know how they typed it in Eretz Yisrael, Amri b'marava, that gzeirosh mishum chatos shemeisu be'oleo. If you're going to have a box that has in it the money for chayva, one of the rules, halacha l'moishe misina by a chatos, which makes chatos different from all the other karbanos, is that if the owner of a chatos passes away, unlike a oila that he or she designated that is brought post-mortem. Chatas may not be brought, and not only may it not be brought, you don't even have the option of yiru achi yista'avu and sell it. No, it's left to die. And subsequently, money that's designated for a chatas, the money has to be destroyed by throwing it into the Yam HaMelech, by grinding it up and throwing it into another body of water. So how can you have a box that has l'chayva? Maybe by the time the kohen is going to take out the money, the owner passed away, and that money has to be thrown into the Yam HaMelech. That has nothing to do with writing. That is what Rav Dimi said. I know it's getting late. We'll stop over here. And we're going to clarify that. And just to say a heads up, that Daf Nun Vav is a daf that we have very often. The whole thing, you'll remember it, for those who learned it the last time. The whole concept, the whole big sugya of Bereira, or no Bereira, which is the big Tosfos and retroactive clarification. What is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? All of that will be clarified, God willing, to be continued. And what we have to now connect, we're gonna say Taroivis is about maybe, or we know the owner died. And we're going to have to give another insight why Rabbi Yehuda disallows 2 golden stands, only needing to have 1, to be continued.